Hi, welcome back to Bookish Islander. My name is Juan. I hope you're doing great. So I'm here today to do the end of the year book tag. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you might have heard me say that I don't like doing tag videos. I don't actually have anything against the format at all. It is more that I find a lot of tags that go around to be very similar, which is why I stopped doing them. But I was thinking of ways of making a video where I could talk about what I have been reading this year and also discuss how I'm thinking about next year for my reading. And then I stumbled upon this tag. I saw a few people doing it on their channels. I think it's a fun tag and one that would allow me to talk about the things that I wanted to talk about at this time of year. You will find all the questions and links to the books I'm going to discuss in the description box for this video. So if you'd like to answer any or all the questions, please go ahead and do so in the comment section down below. I would love to hear your answers. But now, without further ado, as they say, here are the questions and my answers to them. And question number one is, are there any books you started this year that you need to finish? There are, yes. I am just not sure that I will finish some of the books I started this year. Well, this year. I don't actually leave books unfinished usually. I usually finish the books I start. But thinking about this question, 3 books come to mind. The first one is Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. This is the famous 1936 novel about the US Civil War and the Reconstruction era in the American South. I've watched the movie adaptation many times and really like that. So when I was making my reading plans for this year, I looked at some lists that I used to draw inspiration from. You know, those best American novels, best novels in English, best novels of the 20th century. And in one of those, I found Gone with the Wind. I already owned this edition, which is a reproduction of the first edition, so I thought, you know, why not? I started reading the novel. I managed to read more than half. I seem to have stopped at chapter 34, which is on page 567 in this edition. I don't remember exactly why I stopped reading this. My assumption is that because it is quite a long book, I was also probably reading something else at the same time, and I probably found whatever else I was reading more compelling, so I kept pushing this one aside. And then I might have lost interest and put the novel back on my shelf. I think that I didn't find this novel literary enough. If you look at the books I've been reading this year, and there are many different ways in which you could do that. You could go back and watch some of my video reviews or my monthly wrap-up videos that I've been doing since last summer at least, or you can go and just check my Goodreads. You will see that this novel, Gone with the Wind, doesn't exactly fit with my reading taste. It is not the kind of novel I usually read, and it's also not the kind of novel I have been reading this year. It is an epic historical novel. It is extremely straightforward. I suppose, you know, the best thing about it, it's its plot and its main character, the famous Scarlett O'Hara. I have to wonder, however, if I would have responded to the book the same way had I not watched the movie before, but I guess I'll never know. Will I try to finish Gone with the Wind this year? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I'll finish it at some point in the future. I'll keep you posted. Now, the other 2 books that I started this year that I'd like to finish are In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust and The Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa. This year, I bought this French language edition of In Search of Lost Time, but I have read this novel at least twice before. I would quite like to have the whole collection in this edition because it's the best one I have found in the original French. I started reading this one and I was having a great time. And then when I got to the last part, I stopped. Not because I ceased to have a good time, but because I was reading other books that I had not read before, and I prioritized those. So because I have read this novel before, it was not hard to stop, but I feel bad about it and I love Proust. I would love to read all the other volumes, but won't do that until I finish my rereading of this one, which, as you know, is the first one. But because we are already in late November, I won't be able to read all the volumes before the end of the year, at least not if I want to read the books on my November TBR at least. So I might come up with a reading project for next year that will allow me to read Proust as I have intended for years finally. And as for the book of The Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa, which I own in the original Portuguese, I have also read it before. So, you know, it's also the kind of book that you don't need to read continuously. It is the perfect book for dipping in and out. So I keep this volume nearby, and whenever I feel like it, I just read a couple of pages. And at this rate, though, I think I will probably need a few more years to finish this one, but I'm okay with that. Okay, next question. Do you have an autumnal book to transition into the end of the year? I just love the word autumnal, I had to say that. Anyway, I made a video in which I recommended books to read in autumn, so I am going to link to that video here if you would like to get some recommendations for books to read at this time of year. I guess some people might answer this question by talking about books that are evocative of this time of year, but I will answer it by talking about the last book I've read and what I am reading right now. So I spent a few weeks in early November reading Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. The novel, of course, came out in 1981 originally, and it won a ton of literary awards. Midnight's Children was a novel that I wanted to read this year because, you know, I was embarrassed not to have read it before, and I don't know how I managed this, but I went into it knowing almost nothing about it, and I had a great time reading it. I have a lot of thoughts about Midnight's Children, so I think I'm going to do a single book review of it very soon, so watch out if you'd like to hear my thoughts on it. Of course, you know, the best way for you not to miss out on any of my book reviews or any of my other videos is to subscribe and activate the notifications bell. So if I were you, I would do that right now. After I finished Midnight's Children, I started this Portuguese novel called A Sibylla, which is by the great Portuguese writer Agostina Bessa Luís. This novel was originally published in 1954, and to my knowledge, it is not currently available in English translation, but I know that some of my viewers are from Portugal or Brazil, so this is a novel I would recommend if you can read in Portuguese. And there might be translations in other languages as well, but unfortunately not in English. A Sibylla is meant to be one of the best novels in Portuguese from the 20th century, so I'm really looking forward to reading on. Okay, next question. Is there a new release you're still waiting for? Okay, I know that this year I have not been paying particular attention to new book releases. This is something that doesn't really bother me very much because I am wary of hype, but sometimes I do feel like I could be missing out on something by not reading at least some new releases. There were a couple of books this year that I was curious about, and I did reach out to their publishers for review copies, but I don't know whether it is because my channel is still fairly small or because I live in the Canary Islands, but no one wanted to send me a review copy. So I haven't been able to read any new releases, but I haven't been very good at keeping up with new books anyway, so I don't even know what books are coming out before the end of the year, let alone which ones among those I would like to read. So I'm gonna ask you for help. What new releases for this year would you recommend to me? If you have any, please let me know in the comments section below. Now, moving on to the next question, which is, what are 3 books you want to read before the end of the year? Well, I have more than 3 books that I want to read before the end of the year. I haven't decided what books I want to read in December yet, but I do have a little list that I keep on my phone with the books that I want to read before the end of this month, so November. I guess I will just pick 3 books from that list. So the first one would be The Life and Times of Michael Kay by J.M. Coetzee. His novel Disgrace, which I have read at least twice and reviewed here, is one of my all-time favorite novels, but regrettably, I have not read much else by him yet. Last month, I read his 1980 novel Waiting for the Barbarians, which I discussed in my October wrap-up video, and I am determined to read more of his books, probably all of them. But the one I'm looking forward to the most right now and want to read before the end of this year is The Life and Times of Michael Kay. Then, I would like to read something by the French author Marguerite Yourcenar. She's one of the most important European authors of the 20th century, and I have never read anything by her. I have not yet decided which novel I would like to read by her first, but I will probably go for The Abyss. Now, The Abyss is a novel about an alchemist during the Renaissance, and I think it is one of her most popular and critically acclaimed novels, at least in France. Again, I will let you know my thoughts when I have read it. And the third book that I definitely want to read before the end of this year is The Emigrants by W.G. Sebald. I have already read Austerlitz and The Rings of Saturn by this German author who lived in England for many years, and I find his writing so soothing and compelling that I think it is the perfect kind of writing, at least for me, at this time of year when I can get a little bit stressed out. Okay, next question. Is there a book you think could still shock you and become your favorite book of the year? You know, considering that I'm planning to read books by authors by whom I have read great books before, I think there is a strong chance that one of those Coetzee's or Sebalds I'm planning to read between now and the end of the year could become my favorite book of the year. But that wouldn't necessarily shock me. I am also planning to read books by authors I have never read before, like, as I mentioned a moment ago, Marguerite Yourcenar. And I'm always open to changing my mind about books and authors and finding new favorite authors and books. Something that excites me about reading and motivates me to keep reading is the chance that I might not have read my favorite books yet. For all I know, the book that might become my favorite book of all time has not even been written yet. And that's what keeps me reading, really. I will make a video with my favorite books that I have read this year, but only in January, because for all I know, I might not have read the best books of the year yet, and I want to keep reading until the very end of the year. And then I want to look back and see what books have made the biggest impact on me and why, and come back here and share that with all of you. And now the final question, which is, have you already started making reading plans for next year? The answer to this question is kinda. And I say that because I haven't written anything down or made a list of books that I want to make sure that I get to in 2022. At this point, I'm not even sure I'm going to do that for next year. I did it for 2021 and it worked to an extent. In terms of the number of books I included on that list, it was realistic. And looking at the number of books I have already read this year, I could have easily read all the books that I plan to read this year if I hadn't also then read other books as I went along. It is very hard for me to decide what books I want to read in a period as long as 12 months because my interests will change, and reading specific books might make me want to read other books, but I wouldn't know that beforehand. So something that I have started to do recently is to write a list of books, about five books I want to read in any given month. I find it a lot easier to stick to a month's plan than to an annual one. And also another advantage of doing that is that if any of those books makes me want to read another book, I'll just add that book to my reading plans for the following month. So I think I might just continue doing that next year and just plan my reading from month to month. Now, there are a few books that I plan to read in 2021, and I know now that I will not be able to get to them, so I'll try to make them fit into my reading plans for next year somehow. But more generally, I realized that this year I have read a lot of contemporary European literature, also some Russian classics, although not all the ones I wanted to read, but I feel like I have neglected American literature or books that are originally written in English this year. I'd like to read more American literature in particular next year. I think I will stick to the 19th and the 20th centuries, and from time to time read some more recent books, perhaps new releases, but I need to find a way to read in different languages as well. I read books in 6 different languages, but my reading skills are not the same in all those languages, and that means that I need to force myself to read in different languages regularly. Otherwise, I would just focus on books written in English or in Spanish, which are the 2 languages that I can read better. Now, I haven't decided how I'm going to do that, but it's also going to be part of my reading plans for 2022. I don't know, perhaps I will include one book that is neither in English nor Spanish per month. I still need to think about this. I would also like to come up with some fun reading projects for next year, perhaps something where you can join in. So if you have any ideas, please feel free to let me know in the comment section below.